Hello, this is Murray Clark with Sky 3 Media, and today we'll be discussing when. When should you avoid discussing AI? Or rather, when should artists specifically avoid discussing AI? What does it mean to be an artist? But rather, what does it mean to be an organic artist? Because that's who we're talking to. That's who we're talking and referencing. Suppose you are asked a question in which you are not prepared to answer. Suppose you are asked a question in which the answer you feel may reflect badly on you, even if you're not doing it, even if you're not doing anything wrong. It can happen. Or suppose you are just asked a question that makes you feel uncomfortable, in which, dang, I don't know how I'm supposed to answer this. But it could happen. You have to realistically expect to have unintended questions versus intentionally probing questions. The probing intended mechanism, the probe intended question that makes you feel uncomfortable and is intended to inquire into things that you are not ready to talk about. The intended probing question meant to expose you perhaps in some kind of way, or to do a little digging into something you might not feel comfortable discussing, intended to do so. If any of you have been examining YouTube the way I have been recently, we know and are conscious of the fact that there's a lot of probing content that's been going on around the internet, social media, but mainly I've been seeing a lot of YouTube videos in which artists are being probed and interrogated, video vlogging regarding suspicion of AI. So AI culture and suspicion of AI has led to a whole lot of an influx of just probing content. Other artists being cross-examined, being prosecuted by way of video, by the way of the internet, by way of YouTube, and a lot of response blogging. The funny thing is, I see more probing and prosecuting journalism or just vlogging, even if it's not considered journalism, that videos that are calling out people and other artists of accusing them of using AI. And it's just rampant. We're literally living in the wild, wild west of the artist industry. We're in a generation of just probing. So now, suppose it's you. So suppose a scenario that somebody is showcasing your artwork from your social media on their YouTube channel, on their social media page, and they're accusing you of plagiarism, of tracing, referencing, involving AI specifically. What does an organic artist do if you as an artist is being accused of doing the following? So, on a personal note, I'm old school. I was around drawing since before the internet really took off, before there was such a thing as social media. So I go way back, and this whole entire series and topic is coming from the perspective of somebody from the old school. So one thing that I could tell you that divides this generation from my generation is the tablet, the digital tablet drawing, tablet interaction. And the tablet, what I call the tablet aesthetic. My generation was raised on Adobe, so we did everything organically in terms of. So my definition of organic would be paper and pencil, and scanning. We use scanners, scanning machines, and we went directly to our computers. So this generation, how familiar are you with using the scanner and paper method? Because that's how I do my artwork. And that's how me and my peers and my contemporaries, that's how we grew up. This digital era with this digital lining, digital way of drawing by way of tablet separates us from, separates us by aesthetic. And my generation was, however, familiar with the Adobe Illustrator and Vector, which kind of overlaps in terms of aesthetic. But this generation is completely marked by its digital tablets. They don't, and many on these videos, many people, Disney artists and Disney employees don't believe in paper and pencil anymore, like the way my generation did. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You are still considered of original works, original artists, organic artists, by my definition. When I see these YouTube artists profiling and probing these internet artists, digital artists, whatnot, so they tend to profile based on the digital aesthetic. It may not be, in overall speaking, whether it is or not, but it may not be clear to an observer that you are an artist of original works. You have to always be prepared for that, because we are in an era of what I call AI paranoia, artificial intelligence paranoia, and it's destroying our industry. It's destroying the artist community, destroying what I always felt was a tight-knit community, and just an artist industry overall. Artist paranoia, and that's why this is being addressed. When should you discuss AI? If you are getting the idea that the person you're talking to is not clear that you have drawn this originally and organically without the use of AI, you need to be prepared to have that conversation on the spot. So you have a general AI interrogation, which might not be intended to make you look bad, or it could just be an honest question. I feel like, yeah, a person, you should be able to answer questions as long as they exist in a certain context. But you got to consider a general AI question versus a specific AI question, something that's specific and more detailed. That's what you have to be conscious of. Or something, a question as specifically worded to probe you. That's what you need to be conscious and aware of and be prepared for. Be prepared to have that discussion. Why? Does anybody see where we're going with this? If you've been watching YouTube, if you've been following the controversy, and if you've been looking at all of these journalists, or if you want to call them YouTube journalists, YouTube bloggers, they're using a language, a probing, and what's being formed is a probing language culture, which is slowly growing across social media, coming from anger, coming from just artists that are legitimately trying to protect their industry, career. So there's nothing wrong with, a person has to stand trial and has to stand the test of time and examination. Everyone has to stand trial, unfortunately, in the wake of AI, false, artificial work that does not belong to someone posing to be an artist, somebody posing to be a creator. It is my intention to make sure that this is scaled back as much as possible. It has always been my agenda to make sure that we have an AI-free or AI filtered. I always express the term, we're looking for either an AI-free future or an AI-filtered future. Because what if this just comes around to where we can't completely get rid of AI? So it's my goal and agenda to make sure it's scaled back as much as humanly possible so that we can get work. We can have an authentic industry, culture. But it's important to first examine both sides of the coin, the artists and the AI users, the abusers. We want to scale and filter that out as much as humanly possible to the best of our ability. However, you have artists of original works, and they have two sides. We have people who are original artists, and we have people who are alleged to not be original artists. So if we examine these YouTube journalists that are probing all these other artists out there, accusing them of using AI or using artificial intelligence to pass themselves off as authentic artists, a lot of this, they would fall into several categories. One is these bloggers are obviously doing this probing based on their prior negative experiences, their fears of where they think this industry is going. Fears of not getting a job, fears of not having authentic works, fears of just stuff. The material that's they're digesting is artificial. And I don't want that. I wouldn't want that for anybody else. So there's a lot of fear, panic, and paranoia. If you're probing somebody that actually is guilty of using artificial intelligence, then you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. However, the problem here is going after and alleging people who really had nothing to do with AI at all. But we're probing them anyway, which is killing jobs, killing the culture overall. Which is sad, because it's pretty much like cancer of paranoia, which is destroying our workforce. So therefore, in context, these YouTube journalists, bloggers, are assumed to be original artists themselves, or organic artists themselves, who are probing other people whom they believe are not. So what's an organic artist at this point? Just simply put, a person who believes that their work was original. How do we determine if a person's work is original? Because we would have to determine it up against plagiarism, tracing, and artificial intelligence abuse. But what if the person is not guilty of that? So we have what I would call a paranoia culture. Imperfection and basically in the language. Let's break down the language used by these journalists. One word that tends to come up in these examination videos, these journalist videos, are imperfections. One way of being able to identify that in the videos they bring their whole case and they examine the artwork, whether it's anime or different all sorts of artworks, artists, drawers, and illustrators. They'll showcase the artwork and examine it from top to bottom, zooming. And in the video, you could see the vlogger zoom in on the person's artwork, and then they'll use terms like tangents. Look right there, this is a tangent. This right here, that's an inconsistency, or this is slightly off. This is too perfect. This is too imperfect. So the terminology itself is very confusing. It in itself does not determine whether the accuser is right or whether the artist himself is right or protected or guilty or not guilty. But everyone has a right. If we're posting works to the internet, then people have the right to examine, prosecute, and form conclusions. However, this still contributes to paranoia culture. However, if we break down what's wrong with these examinations, vloggings, prosecutions, allegations, investigations, or whatever, the language is off. The language is very confusing, leaving us no real way to determine whether or not someone is leaving us no way to reliably determine whether or not somebody is actually using AI. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. And we need to, before we can have somebody prosecuted, so to speak, of using AI, we have to use a legally and fair way of communication. So before we can prosecute somebody, we have to get the communication right. We have to speak a certain language. It has to be an industrially controlled language as to how a person is probed or interrogated about regarding an allegation of AI. Therefore, bringing it back to when should an artist discuss AI publicly? You would you would have to take precaution. You would have to be aware of this before it occurs. There's all sorts of factors that go in before we can determine and give a yes or no answer. There are all sorts of factors that go into probing, questioning, communicating, before assessing whether or not somebody's works are legitimate or considered original. And if this is not done the correct, appropriate way, then we're looking at people who are innocent artists that are being innocent original artists who did truthful work without the use of any AI, in the context that they're being accused of. You're looking at possibly you as an artist being boycotted, being canceled, God forbid, all sorts of scenarios in which could destroy a person's career, their work, their income, their way of life. The reputation of the artist is at stake. So, let me know what you guys think of that in the comments. Feel free to respond to this video. Let me know what you think, your thoughts. Please like and subscribe to this channel. And stay tuned for part 2.